Hey, what's up, everyone? Good morning. Welcome back. It is Monday. We're starting things off this week yet again. We haven't done this, I guess, in a while. I was away, but we're moving through the August summer end pretty much, and let's see what's going on. So, I hope everyone's doing well. It's August 11th. What we're going to be doing today is going through some of this news, highlighting some anticipation for the week ahead, looking at what happened kind of last week and breaking down what the futures market, specifically in the S&P and the Nasdaq, has the potential to do for the following week. Morning, Aiden. Morning, everyone else. We'll do this and we'll jump into our live session. And don't forget, this week we'll be doing some live streams on Wednesday in the afternoon and Friday in the morning. So first and foremost, right, some of the economic data that we have, it's good to understand what's going on. So today, President Trump speaks. If you open this little folder here on Forex Factory, you can get a decent understanding of what's going on, right? Some kind of press conference being held, but that's not the main piece of information that we're looking at in terms of the president this week out of the U.S. First and foremost, right, we have the expectation of the China-U.S. tariff truce that expires this Tuesday, August 12th, so tomorrow. Failure to extend it might reignite some trade tensions. We also have President Trump expects to meet with Putin in Alaska on Friday. And any developments around Ukraine or sanctions may sway energy and defense markets, and we'll see what kind of information comes out from there. But what is predetermined on a consistent basis here in terms of news out of the U.S. this week, the main kicker that we've got to begin the week is on Tuesday, right? I've highlighted here the CPI data, so the inflation data is going to be very important. That's going to tie things together with what the Fed has most recently said, as well as how inflation is doing with these markets near all-time highs. We have the PPI data that comes out on Thursday this week as well, and then some of the other, I guess, lower impact news on Friday, August 15th, right? Retail sales, industrial production, capitalization utilization, and import-export price, along with the U of Michigan consumer sentiment. We also have some Fed official speeches throughout the week, which may hint at upcoming policy moves. We also have the resigning governor expected to step down. I believe it's this week. Trump nominated a political figure, right? The political space is coming into the Federal Reserve for the stand-in of a Fed governor. Again, this is not Powell that's being replaced, but the descendants over the last meeting have been more so on the rate-cutting side. And Christopher Waller, who is currently gunning for the Fed chair, I guess, seat, the Fed chair, is one of those descendants that is wanting to see rates get cut a little more aggressively. So that's going to be pretty interesting. In terms of earnings this week, right, we don't have too much, considering that we've moved past the majority of the Mag 7s. We still have NVIDIA to wait for, right? NVIDIA is coming out, I believe, towards the end of the month here. Let me just move over to my Mag 7 names. NVIDIA gapping down slightly here. Apple on a pretty strong tear. But NVIDIA is reporting it's the last of the Mag 7s that's expected at the end of August. I believe it's the 20-something. Don't quote me. Wednesday, 27th of August. So in terms of the Mag 7 names, pretty much all of them recorded earnings. And we have a most recent move on Apple. Some of the news of further investments in the U.S. has driven this thing up over 13% last week, and we're looking to see some of that continuation. Other big names are still holding up pretty well. Apple's the main laggard now, trying to catch up, along with Tesla. Tesla has been a pretty big laggard. It's gapping up. It's pretty much the only big Mag 7 name to have a significant gap higher this morning, and we'll see if that tech strength does continue, because one of the key components of this most recent rally, of this larger overall rally in the markets, is the strength in big tech that we're looking for Mag 7 to continue this upside momentum. Now, one of the biggest earnings, I guess, reports this week, the way I see it, right, on Tuesday, we have things like Circle, Cardinal Health, CoreWeave. CoreWeave is the main one that I'd be watching for an AI play. It's really IPO'd. It's had a pretty significant upside momentum move over the last several months here. It's an AI name that started as a crypto mining company. It switched to AI infrastructure. It operates over 33 data centers across North America and Europe with more than 250,000 high-performance GPUs, liquid cooling systems, and NVIDIA InfiniBand networking designed for AI. A lot of people are going to be looking at this because AI has a huge headline in the most recent economic factors and reports that we've seen throughout, accounting for the most recent GDP figure, which was a growth of 3%. AI and AI infrastructure spending has accounted for 1.3% of those, which is greater than the consumer spending that we've seen. So all these AI names that continue to report earnings, we're going to expect more and more out of them to see if there's actually anything viable to support this much the economy. Everyone calling this a bubble. We'll see how much of a bubble it is. So that's going to be a big name to watch on Tuesday in terms of earnings. On Wednesday, we have Cisco. On Thursday, John Deere, Applied Materials, another chip name, right? Semi's name. JD as well out of China. And then on Friday, we don't really have too much. So let's dive into what we got in terms of these equities, starting off with NASDAQ. Last week, one of the important pictures that I do want to mention with the profiles here, if I can find it, right? This is a weekly profile chart on NASDAQ, and not last week. So last week we ended August 8th. The week before we ended August 1st. So the August 1st end week, you can see this profile is very thin, right? Red volume indicates very thin volume. We have thickness of volume in the middle where we have a heavier distribution. So this red volume that was left from the prior week was extremely thin, which has a huge potential of getting filled, meaning we expect to see the continuation through this low volume extremely easily, which happened last week. So us closing into the bottom of the August 1st week of thin volume, any movement into distributions higher, suggesting any movement above 22,820 from last week is an easy fill of low volume all the way up into the balance, the heavier balance, which is 23,330 and higher. So that got completed last week. This week, or I guess the prior week, which was August 8th end, we had a very thick weekly profile encompassing the upside movement with consistent volume, suggesting more upside momentum, which is something that I want to look at this week. Now, this upside momentum, we have several distributions, heavier distributions lower, and it's important to take a look at the Friday balance as well. So the way I see things, let's open up some of these extended triangles or rectangles to see what we got going on. So what we got is Friday's balance over here, right? Realistically, this balance, I have expectations that this is going to be the first area that buyers would want to hold around 23,620, right? That's going to be the first area where the buy side wants to hold to shoot us towards all-time highs, right? If we start losing that 23,620 on NASDAQ, we have this low volume down here, which coincides with a major distribution that starts around 23,520. 23,520 allows Friday's low auction to get cleaned up into the bottom and prices to pull back into a very heavy, thick distribution top, which would allow the continuation of the general upside momentum if we actually have strength in this market. 23,520 is going to be a very important area this week. The buyers really do not want to let that go. Otherwise, we start moving into a mean reversion type scenario where we accept into a balance lower, allowing the sell side to open things up. Where in that case, right, they're desperately trying to hold 23,430 and then down below into the auction bottom that we sniffed out last week, 23,330. So, long story short, if the buyer is strong this week, they shouldn't really let sellers absorb under that 23,520. So 23,620 and 520 are two very important areas to hold out to begin the week. Obviously, things could be a little slower considering we have CPI pre-market tomorrow. If we take a look at the S&P is a bit weaker, right? NASDAQ at its peak from Friday's close, we were about 80 points away from the all-time high. S&P, as you can see, is decently far away from those all-time highs in relation. So S&P, it's tried to push to the upside swing on the overnight a little into last week. We kind of failed last week's highs just by a bit. But what it is that we're looking for, where's that tool again? We're looking for the tool. So what it is that we're looking for, we have a developing balance into these all-time highs somewhere like this, right? From 63.95 area being the bottom, which is also Friday's balance bottom, the weekly profile balance bottom, all the way up to 64.35. So currently we're within this area. Realistically, best case scenario is that we hold within this area for that buy side movement, right? We've accepted from below to above this balance, suggesting that around 63.95, 64.100, the heavier buyer really wants to hold out those pullbacks so we can see 64.35 and higher, right? The buyer wants to take prices towards this heavier volume from a few weeks ago, right? 64.48 area. Above that, all-time highs, we can probably clear that to accept into 64.60. So the buy side, the way I see it, right, they don't want to let go of 63.95. Otherwise, we have some desperation down here at 63.70, where heaviness of volume was Friday, right? So that's a desperation buy zone, 63.70. If the real buyer is going to hold out on the S&P this week to start things off, 63.95 area, they really want to push from there. If they can start bidding from 64.15, right, that's an aggressive, very high support zone to see if we can push through that 64.35. So I'd want to see those buyers come in on every sell chance that they get to start things off. I don't imagine it's going to be very easy for the buy side to get above 64.35 to begin things, let alone 64.48. So those are a few areas to keep in mind. So with that being said, that's what I've got to begin the week. I hope everyone got enough information absorbed from that data and what we got going on. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Enjoy the beginning of the week. Take it slow. It's Monday. No need to go crazy with it. Take it step by step as more data comes in. And remember, tomorrow pre-market CPI comes out, so things could be slower going into that, and we'll see what